labs, totally unrelated to XML. One of the things that Altiris says when you fire it up is, Altiris makes setting up labs fun. I mean, it's just the most amazing thing to me. It makes it less awful. Anyway, WordPerfect is a little bit the same way. WordPerfect truly does not make XML fun. It's still work, but it can be really very helpful. And that's sort of what we're going to be looking at. Why is XML neat? It allows you to structure information in new ways, and it allows you to reuse information that you've previously captured and organized in some format, and you want to return to another format or move to another format. XML allows you to create complex data structures without the need for a relational database. This is the kind of thing, I don't know if John is here, that would make him cringe. We can stuff lots of extra data inside a single XML record that would normally require a couple of tables within an SQL database. And I'll show you that in a little bit and show you why that's both interesting and somewhat worrisome. That is, if I remember to do that. Most importantly, XML allows you to validate your documents. In other words, to ensure that a document contains the information that you want it to contain. It does not do some of the really fancy stuff that SGML does, but it does allow you to define structures for your document and require that those structures be present. And that's one of the most interesting things to me about XML as a data storage tool. By the way, at any point, I mean, this is still, of course, introductory material, but at any point, please stop me if what I'm saying isn't clear, or if you know better. I'm a beginner at this too. Let's talk about the tools that we're going to use, that I'm going to demonstrate today. WordPerfect 9. Okay. I went to the Office XP presentation a couple of days ago, and Office is hugely popular among even us law schools now. And in fact, we would estimate that something like 70% of our users are using Word. They're not really using WordPerfect a lot. What we have is we have a lot of copies of WordPerfect around, and we have a license for, a lot of copies. And so we have WordPerfect 9, which is part of the WordPerfect Office 2000 suite. This contains the XML tools that we're going to talk about today. I haven't had a chance to try the new WordPerfect. Just out of curiosity, how many of your departments, not you personally, use WordPerfect as your primary word processor? Not surprising, I suppose, given the nature of my talk. I think that percentage may be slightly higher than the general population of law schools out there. But in any case, this is an area where at least the latest version of Office still provides no XML tools to end users. Okay, so WordPerfect is still the one there. A general purpose text editor is still necessary because we're going to show you in a second how to create a document type definition and how to create that from some sample well-formed XML documents. That is still, at least for me, easier to do in a plain text editor than to try to do it within WordPerfect and try to remember to save it as text. Validating parser, hidden inside every copy of Internet Explorer 5 whatever, is a validating parser. And it's tremendously useful. There are command line tools that will allow you to validate your documents, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second, about what that is for folks who are not as familiar with that. But, and of course, WordPerfect will validate as well. For basic checking your steps work with XML, IE is tremendously useful. And it's a great way to browse XML data without doing anything else to the data. A style sheet editor. One of the difficulties, which we're going to talk about in a minute with XML, is that you can't really present raw XML to the world. You have to style it in some fashion. This is a benefit from the point of view of the folks behind XML. But you need some way to make the XML slightly more presentable. There are lots of ways to do that. In fact, that's kind of a problem. We're going to talk about 3, and I'm going to leave out the really complicated one. But if you do anything with style sheets, I happen to like Top Style Light. XSL tools, XSLT tools, or XSLFO tools, like those from the XML Apache project. We're going to use those in a little bit to transform our XML into HTML for all of our legacy browsers out there that want to read HTML. And we'll use that in a minute too. Everything is free except for WordPerfect 9, which will set you back, $29 or something. Okay, very quickly we'll run through this. The basic structure of an XML document. We have elements enclosed in tags. We have attributes. And then we have data. A resulting XML fragment might be font color equals red, roses are red, /font. Some of the folks out there will go, well, that's HTML. That's right. It is. It is XML as well. And you might think of HTML as a subset of XML. Sort of the core of XML. XML documents can be well-formed and or validated. It's actually possible, I read, to have a valid but not well-formed document, although I can't get my mind around that. An XML document is well-formed without reference to an external document type definition. That is, its tags are nested, they're syntactically correct, but they don't refer to any set of external rules that tells you what kinds of tags you can use. That's a well-formed document. This is a well-formed document apparently having to do with something called game tools. And we have some elements, scissors, paper, stone, which have some data within them. And this set of elements is enclosed within something called game tools. It is a child of game tools. Apparently, game tools is some sort of set that contains these elements. But that's about all we can guess about it at this point. We don't really know what the rules are yet. By the way, I'm not using PowerPoint. And I'm not even using Wimpy Point, whatever Elmer was using yesterday. This is being shown in Opera. This is a web browser which has a very nice presentation mode built around cascading style sheets level 2. But anyway, still doesn't make me a very good creator of slides. Not nearly as good as Pablo's, with no sharks or anything. Well-formed XML. Okay, we're going to create a basic XML document in a text editor. And the reason for doing that is we don't know a lot about how to create these document type definitions. We're interested in document type definitions because they enforce structure on us. They allow us to create valid documents. At a more practical level, we're interested in document type definitions because without them, we can't use WordPerfect to edit our XML documents. So we have to do a little legwork up front, and that means creating some test data. Then we're going to go to a terrific website called DTDGen. And DTDGen is going to take our well-formed, that is correct, although we're not sure what all of the rules are, syntactically correct document. It's going to take the well-formed document and it's going to return a document type definition to us. And we're going to look at it and we go, oh, that's how you create those things. Okay? Let's look at a couple of the things that are required. First off is the XML declaration at the top. And I already see a typo. There should be a question mark in between the less than sign and the XML. XML version equals 1, and we're creating a course list. This is the kind of thing that I have to do. By the way, my experiments with WordPerfect as an XML editor came out of trying to convince the secretary that Emacs was not that hard to use. There are some excellent tools for a very sophisticated editor called Emacs, and that failed. And so we went looking for other alternatives. That's why we have this. In any case, we have a course list. We're making it up as we go. We're creating our own vocabulary. Okay, this is going to become our document type definition. So we have a course list. Within each course list, there's a course, and each course has some attributes. It has a sequence number, that might be like a catalog number, and it has an updated flag for the last time the course list perhaps was edited. And then it has a title, credits, and summary, and then within the summary, there's nothing that says we can't reuse HTML tags if we're familiar with them and they make us more comfortable. And I'm just using the P tag as a marker for paragraph. Okay? Does this make sense so far? Is this horribly basic? One of the things that you have to be aware of if you're going to use test data to model anything, you have to give yourself a couple of different cases, different possibilities. Otherwise, when you feed this document to the DTD generator, it's not going to realize that some courses have prerequisites and some courses don't. Okay? If we look up here, we'll see that there's a prereq called Contracts 1 and another prereq called Agency 2, and obviously I just made the the course names up. And it's part of something called a certificate, and maybe another certificate there. So there are a couple of certificates involved. We come down to our second bit of test data, and we see a different sequence number. This is a date. Okay, we come down, and we see there's only one paragraph in it. There aren't two. And there are no prerequisites, and there's no certificate mentioned. So we appear to have a situation where you can have a course that has prerequisites or does not have prerequisites. It can have 0 or more certificates that it appears to belong to, that sort of thing. So I'm modeling the data a little bit. Okay. After I do that, I check the previously created XML document for well-formedness, a word I cannot say. Well-formedness. And the easiest way to do that is to use the validator within Internet Explorer. Okay, and Internet Explorer will validate your document if you feed it a document. And this presentation, of course, will be up on the web. There's some details about that. It's in any basic XML book. At the end, again, I'm going to go back over the books. In any case, we test the document to make sure that our basic understanding of how XML works is correct. Watch it not validate. And ignore that. Okay. I've received the official stamp of approval. My XML is well-formed and validated. If I want to look at the document and how the document would appear within Internet Explorer, I can do that by expanding these elements. So we have a course list that within it has courses inside the courses, we have other elements like a title and so forth. Let's go ahead and look at the summary. And within the summary is a paragraph. And what you're seeing is this structure, this tree, the document tree, is being displayed for you. And this is one of the ways that Internet Explorer is a very helpful tool for visualizing these. And it's not that I have anything against Netscape or Opera. Neither one of them happens to do this as well as Internet Explorer. I use the other browsers a lot. At this point, we have a valid document. So we're ready to go to this website. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. If it wasn't validated, an error message. It says, now what it says, for example, I have this problem with leaving off the closing greater than sign, the angle bracket. And what you actually get is something that looks a little bit like the visual debugger from Microsoft, a little dotted line and an arrow. And at least with the kinds of very simple documents that I create, it's quick to see. I mean, it jumps out at you, what the problems are. That's why I do tend to do these things. Obviously, for the presentation, you try not to show up with broken documents. But I tend to have IE open, and then Note tab open, and then I'm Alt-tabbing back and forth between them until it quits complaining, and then I'm done. But the errors are actually shown pretty clearly. Yes, sir?
How do you use Internet Explorer to validate and to check your page?
There is a script that you can get from Microsoft. Let me go back to it. It's in the XML section of Microsoft's website. If you do a search for it, it's validate_VBS. It's a very short Visual Basic script that exercises the validating parser that's part of Internet Explorer. And we could also just view course list within Internet Explorer. It wouldn't attempt to validate the document, but it would display it in a really nice tree-oriented format. So that's another option, just to view your XML documents in IE. Are there other questions? Yes, sir.
Just a comment about validation.
You should.
If you have elements in the DTDs, or if you have an element like title that is called, that is required, and in your document you don't have a title, it will tell you you're missing this.
Right. And Mo is actually exactly right at this point, because there is no DTD. Technically speaking, the document cannot be validated. The document can be checked for being well-formed. I nested my tags properly. Whatever odd vocabulary I chose, I appeared to, obey those rules. So at this point, and that's a great comment, we haven't validated the document. We've only checked it for well-formedness. At the point that we have a well-formed document, we can go to this website. Are there other questions? Okay. And we can look at this terrific cartoon. It's just and that's how you'll feel in the beginning. It'll be you, and you'll be sitting there. At this point, you upload the XML file, and what you get back is the DTD. Okay, there's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing. How do you know that the DTD that you got back is what you really wanted, if you don't exactly know how to create DTDs in the first place? And that depends on, the DTD will be correct. Okay, we have a classic sort of I hate the phrase garbage in, garbage out, but I mean, you really have to think about those border cases. If you're going to allow people to have a middle name, but not always, then if you're going to create your DTDs automatically this way, you need to do a record that has no middle name, for example. Okay, you just have to model your data. You will get back a syntactically correct DTD, but it may not do exactly what you expect unless you've thought about the data. Here's the DTD that we get back. And I have to apologize if you're watching very, very closely. The data that I showed you earlier was not used to generate this DTD exactly. There's this very, very slight difference in it. Let's look at the rules that DTD gen, which for the tech folks is built on top of SACS, which is a parser, a well-known parser. DTD gen has spit out this document type definition for us. And let's look at it. It says that we have an element. Oh, by the way, one of the things, do you notice what it's done with the element names? They're in alphabetical order. They are not in the order that you are thinking of them. Okay. Yeah, it's just to add a little challenge. This is good if you have, say, 150 elements, and your root element is something like XL. Yeah, it'll be way down at the bottom. All right, it's alphabetized. Let's start with what we know to be the root element, because we designed this. Element course list. Okay, course list is composed of one or more courses. Courses are composed of a title, something called credits, something called summary, prerequisites or not. Okay, 0 or more prerequisites. And here's the subtle change from the data that I just threw up there. Only one certificate. Okay, you can have 0 or 1. That's what the question mark means. By the time I got around to doing this again, I'd thrown in a couple of certificates, and so the data I showed you earlier does not generate this document type definition. Within each element, within each course, there are 2 attributes. Okay, now we're all familiar with attributes from HTML. Okay, columns, rows, BG color equals. All right. Here's one called sequence number, or seqnum, that appears to require a name token, meaning it can't start with certain reserved characters. The same thing for course and updated, same thing, name token. Now, updated in my mind means a date, means the last time that someone revised that course description, so we don't have these horribly stale course descriptions out there. It doesn't really know that, and it's not its responsibility to check that you're entering a date. Okay? It's your responsibility to check. If there are SGML people here, I believe you'd say, you can do all that in SGML. That's true, and SGML is more complicated than XML. Or so I'm told. I've not ever really done much with it. All right, we have a document type definition. So we're finally there. Okay? Now that we have this document type definition, we save it. And by the way, it just got spit out on a web page. Right? So we copy the text, save it as something.dtd, courselist.dtd was the name I chose. Then we're going to run the WordPerfect 9 XML Project Designer. We're going to create a DTD, create a generic layout, go get a Diet Coke. Now, to warn you about something else, well, I probably don't have to warn you about something else with WordPerfect. It crashes. Not all the time. But once in a while it does. This is actually going to take us directly into WordPerfect, which is not what I want to do.
Can I ask you, so what happens
Absolutely.
if you start creating, you just create your XML document in WordPerfect? What do you end up with instead of going through the previous steps, the checking the well-formedness and the validating this and everything like that?
Well, you actually can't, WordPerfect requires you to reference a DTD
Oh, I see.
if you want to edit it as an XML document. And you do that by going here to the project designer. Okay, the project designer is hidden far away in the WordPerfect hierarchy. And so the first thing I do if I'm going to be doing this kind of thing is I put a shortcut to it out on the desktop. In the project designer, you can compile your DTD. And this, we have to get back a little bit to the history of WordPerfect to understand what's going on here. WordPerfect approaches XML as another type of WordPerfect template. Depending on who you talk to, they were a horrible addition to WordPerfect or not. But it's WordPerfect sort of bundle up everything having to do with a project and compile it into a single file. This has benefits and it has costs. One of the benefits is that if you've gone to this trouble of creating this DTD and you've compiled it and WordPerfect says it's okay, we're done. You come out of it with something called a WordPerfect template, a WPT file. You can then email the WPT file to anybody else who runs WordPerfect, and they get everything you've done. The compiled in DTD and any layouts that you create. Does that make sense? Okay, WordPerfect templates. Those are the WordPerfect projects. And that's what we're doing here. We're creating a WordPerfect project. Now the problem that you run into here is this edit, compile loop that you get into as you start playing with your DTD or give it to users in WordPerfect, and they say, this is awful. This isn't our data at all. And you say, oh yeah, okay. Well, you have to go back, tweak the DTD, create the project again, give them the project. So there's that incremental development stage. Once the DTD is finalized, once you've created that template, it's very nice. You fire it off to somebody, and they don't have to understand any of the magic that went into this. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. Now we would compile blah, 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 and it would work without any errors. Actually, it hardly ever works without any errors. But let's pretend that it did. Once we actually get into WordPerfect, we start it up, we say new XML document, and we choose from our list of templates what XML document we can use. Okay? And we're going to choose course list. And after all of this hard work, we're finally ready to actually edit a course list. File, new XML document, pops up a long list, and there's course list. We select it. Okay, and let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing here. It's a traditional WordPerfect document screen with a couple of additions. The notable one is this pane on the left. Okay, that's where the tree structure of your document will be displayed, a lot like that tree that you saw in the validator, or the tree you would see within IE if you called up an XML document within IE. But once we've gotten to this point, the rest is relatively anticlimactic. What we do here is choose the element that we want to use. And when you're sitting at the root of the document, there can be only one root element, and the root element in this document type definition is course list. So I don't really have any choice. I pick course list, click on it, and it inserts this stuff. All of a sudden we're out of traditional UTF-8 or ASCII text editing, we're not seeing the tags anymore as an open and closed thing. We're seeing them in a way that looks a lot like WordPerfect reveal codes. Okay, so if you like the WordPerfect reveal codes metaphor, you're going to see that throughout this process. Because of the document type definition, it knows that these two attributes are part of any course. It also knows that they're required. So we click Edit Value, and we say whatever. Again, it's not checking my data. Actually, it probably is. That semicolon was probably a mistake. And it'll complain about it in a second. Sequence number. And we click Close. All right. There's a bunch of other stuff that is required by our DTD. Remember, every course has to have a title, and it has to have credits, the number of hours credit we're giving, and it has to have a summary with at least one paragraph in it. And it may have some other optional things. You might remember prerequisites was one possibility, and certificate, if the course was part of a particular certificate requirement. This part is, at this point, this is really fairly anticlimactic, blah, blah, blah. We go in there and we start typing away. Notice how the shape, the document structure is reflected over here. For my purposes, most of the time, this is overkill, and I don't really care about seeing that, and especially if I'm working on a laptop with a relatively small screen, I turn that off. Unclick the little tree thing, and that goes away. All right, once we're here, we can enter data just like we would within a word processor. Okay. And we're perfectly free to do bad things as well. Okay. Because we have such a tiny, simplified DTD that we've been looking at, you would probably remember that data always has to be enclosed within paragraph tags. Okay, when you talk about a large DTD with 100 elements, you might not remember that. Okay? So our next step, and the kind of thing that I would do often if I were using WordPerfect to edit these kinds of documents, is you validate. This little check mark right up here will validate the XML document. And this takes us back to what kinds of errors do you see? How does it help you do your job? And it'll check all sorts of things. This is by far the most common response that you're going to get from WordPerfect because you forgot and you put in some PC data, some parsed character data where your document type definition didn't allow it. Okay, it says data is not allowed, takes you to the offending location, and you have to fix it. Okay, and you say to yourself, I'm going to get overconfident and assume that was the only error. And you say to yourself, well, that's not right. I need to get it enclosed in a paragraph tag. Look what's going on up here. In that drop-down box, you're seeing the valid tag. That is the valid tag according to your DTD that is available at this point in the document. And it's the only one. It's our only choice because this is such a simple document type definition. We click on it? Sure we do. Okay, it wraps the text. We run the check again. It asks us this message and this question, and it'll run it forever if you want. So what we have here at this point is a tool that is not as fast to edit as what some of us might be more used to using, but it is a tool that I'm comfortable training a secretary how to use. And one of our goals is to get this data off of our desks, the other folks who work with me, and onto someone else's desk so that the data can be entered and maintained. Okay? Now, if we got questions at this point.
Are you going to show us how to take it a step further and then...
Actually make it look pretty?
Well, no, take it out and load it and mount it and all that stuff.
Yeah. That's the next step if the planets align. Okay. Yes, sir.
Can you search on specific elements?
What a terrific question. XML Path is all about searching sub-elements within a DTD. So that, for example, if we want to search for everything that is part of the entrepreneurial law certificate, which might be a reasonable search, you can do that. You cannot do it within WordPerfect. WordPerfect is best thought of as a front end for getting your XML data into the system so that you can then take the high-paid consultant and pay them to develop an XML Path-based search mechanism. Now, there are several, including, I actually have one on here. There's an XML Path-based search mechanism for Windows. It's a nice, tiny little self-contained executable that you can play with. And I'll show you some links to some of that stuff. But that's a great question, and that is one of the strengths of using XML as a document storage mechanism. Other questions? Let's talk about making this look pretty. It's almost a mantra within the XML community that data has no format. I mean, the data is in itself beautiful, and it should be totally divorced and separated from presentation. Most of us live in a world where presentation is absolutely paramount, especially after now 15 years of pseudo-WYSIWYG word processors. And so almost the first question when you demo this, even to the data entry clerk, is, that's ugly. How do I make it look prettier? A couple of options within WordPerfect. The first one is turn all this off. That's a lot prettier, right there. Actually, that's more an editing convenience than anything else. You can display them as markers. You can display them as codes, which is usually what I'm doing. You can turn it all off. Much, much more interesting is going back to the template program, the project designer, and creating layouts. And let's go do that. Except it's not going to cooperate with me. What I would like it to do is load this particular project. And again, because this stuff does crash from time to time, I don't think I'm going to do that. It doesn't crash all the time. But what I am going to show you is another. There we go. Very good. Okay. This is the layout designer. This is great. This is the layout designer. You see all of the elements of our very simple DTD. Okay. And you see that formatting can be applied at the beginning of each tag, at the end of each tag, and then after you've reverted. You can also run macros, and you can also associate styles with them. So, for example, if we double-click on paragraph, we have the more traditional types of layout control. It is not by any means perfect. I find it somewhat painful, but you can. Whoa. Now, when I say I find it painful, it is not in any way comparable to the pain you will go through designing solid CSS style sheets for complex documents, or working through XSLT, which is another thing we're going to talk about in just a second. What you can do, let me pull up. Okay, our pre-configured one. Let's go to generic, and let's turn on our display. All right, and let's display the tree. Okay, here's a course list with a little data in it, and some tagging, and it's a generic layout. The generic layout is the one that's created by default. Puts a hard return before every tag, hard return after every tag. It's meant to get data into the program. With the layout designer that I just showed you, I created one called Fancy. Okay. This is exactly the same data, and I'm not a design person, I'm not a web person, but this is exactly the same data with rules from the layout creator applied. Okay, so this is identical data. These layouts can be bundled or will be bundled, you actually don't have any choice, within that same template file that you create. So you can create, or at least the way that I see this working, is you create a generic layout that's for bang it out data entry, and then you create something that models your paper documents. You do have access to things like page counters, tables of contents generation. You can tie images to particular tags so that a logo gets thrown up whenever the logo tag is used. You can do all of that. Now somebody should be saying, that's non-standard. It's horribly non-standard. It won't work anywhere else other than WordPerfect. It is not XSLT. It's not CSS. It's not DSSSL. It is none of those things that you are thinking it might be. It's some guy in Ottawa came up with that. But if your goal is to get the data into a structured form that might make your web guru happy, that might make your database people happy, and you also have a constituency who wants a traditional print document at the end of the day, the layout designer works very well. And I'm actually pulling up the wrong document because there's another feature of this that I kind of like. When you have fielded data, for example, like prerequisite, it is nice to throw up prerequisites, colon, and then whatever they are. Without a true if-then oriented programming language, it is difficult to get those kinds of things out of this type of project, of this type of product, if that makes sense to people. What WordPerfect does allow you to do, you can have the formatting applied to the first instance of the tag within a record, and then switch to different formatting for all other instances. That covers an amazing number of cases. The other thing that you can do is and I'm cutting this part short because I do want to talk about XSLT and CSS, some much more traditional technologies for rendering this stuff. But the other thing that you can do is you can say that a paragraph at the top level under the heading is formatted with inch margins on each side, but that a paragraph within a course description is formatted with 1.5 margins in 11 point, Verdana or whatever. So it knows the location of the element in the document hierarchy. You don't have to define a P subhead and a P head. Okay, it knows that if it applies certain style rules, if the paragraph is within, or whatever element we're talking about, I'm using that obviously as an example, if that is within a particular element or sub-element. And so it's really a very useful tool. but it is also very proprietary. We've already seen all of this. I want to show you a couple of things that I did not talk about, and then we'll hurry. There are two features over here that we did not discuss: splitting current tags and ending current tags, and then the validation we looked at. The next is the layout designer. Splitting the current tag is a much more useful feature than you would ever imagine. Let's say you have a 200-page document that's just raw text, and your DTD is designed to capture this raw text. And so it's got an author and some identifying number and some other stuff, and then it's strings of paragraphs. Okay? You can grab the raw text from some other source, dump it into the document, wrap everything with one paragraph element, and then go to the end of each paragraph, or write a macro that goes to the end of each paragraph and runs the split tag command. It is a very useful command for bringing legacy data in here without having to do a whole lot of typing. It's one of those sort of nice little features. The other things I believe that we've actually already talked about, and I'm going to skip them. Again, very similar to regular WordPerfect, generic layout for data entry. Get in the habit of always checking what tags are available. See if I can go back to WordPerfect and see we're still editing. At this level of the document, what can I insert? And it says, well, no, you can't insert anything. Let's go back to generic. On display codes. Okay, right here I can always right-click and find out what elements are valid. There are none that are valid right there. That's a hint. Shouldn't be messing with the data right there. And I can also edit attributes and go on from there. All right. Well, let's talk very briefly about some of the other options for formatting, and probably if you want to explore those, you'll have to look at the presentation on the web. We, I think, are going to run out of time. Presentation options, quick and dirty. Internet Explorer. It will display the tree structure of your document very well. It'll demonstrate what you're up to, what you're doing, to somebody else who may not have the same software on their machine that you have. Then we have the WordPerfect internal formatter. As I discussed in response to Mark's question, the idea there is to render documents for people who are used to print. Okay, it was really the way I view that. Then we have CSS, and then we've got all the fun ones. Okay, you can style XML documents directly using CSS. If there is a style sheet associated with an XML document, a modern web browser will render the document. Okay, it will display it. I don't recommend that, and hopefully the webmasters in the room should just go. It doesn't degrade gracefully at all. Most older browsers won't display your XML with anything like what you expected. So that leaves us, at least for a little while, if we want a nice industry standard, quote unquote, industry standard way to transform our XML to something that we can use on the web. Probably the best way to do that is to use an XSLT engine to transform the data from one XML, which is the one you've created, to another XML, which is HTML, so that mere mortals can view it on your intranet or wherever. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, those are other cool things we can do. Now I'm getting ahead of myself. I find it difficult to get my mind around XSLT, and I really haven't done it yet. But I want to show you this very quickly, just so that we can bridge the gap between WordPerfect as an input mechanism and other tools as an output mechanism, especially because we're sensitive to the need to get stuff back out to the web. Okay, this is an XSLT style sheet. Its job in life is to convert the course list to basic HTML. And I think if you look at this, you can see exactly what's going on. Okay, it says, if I see a document that matches course list, emit this. HTML, a head, a title, blah, blah, blah. Close that head, start the body. Here's a little, first heading. Then the next step, I need to apply templates, whatever other templates are in the file. When I'm finished with that, close up and go home. So we have to look at the other template. And this is horribly basic. Okay, in fact, you'll note it doesn't actually render all the data we've got. But look what's going on. If we match on course, and by the way, this gets back to your question about searching, because the XPath engine is being used to do the search and retrieval. We don't necessarily have to match on course. I could match on content. I could match on something that included a certificate requirement for entrepreneurial law, and I could only emit an HTML page with those courses in there, which opens the way for some, you can do this stuff in real time. I don't have that kind of, we're not doing that. But it does open the door for taking a big list of documents and repurposing them, sending them back out in discrete chunks to other locations. In any case, what goes on here, if we match course, throw up a heading 2, and include whatever content is marked as being inside the title tag. Throw up the text credits, emit the text credits, and throw up however many credits are there. Put this inside and again, I apologize, my HTML is not great. Block quote, put whatever is inside the summary, and that would be 1 or 100,000 paragraphs inside of summary. They're going to be formatted as a block quote. If I were doing anything halfway right with this, I would also have handled paragraphs. And I also would have thrown up the prerequisites and the certificate and all the rest. But I just want to leave you with this other option out there. So you can meet a lot of needs within WordPerfect, and using the WordPerfect styling tools. And then you can meet other needs, a different set of needs, by using XSLT. This, of course, is when you come back to your IT department and you say, how do we do this? Having created all this nice structured data for them. Again, this will be up sometime soon. Print resources. My favorite XML, and I'm a beginner with XML, but my favorite XML book by far is XML A Primer by Simon St. Laurent, or Saint Laurent. I have the second edition. There is now a third edition out. It's just an absolutely great book, or at least it is for me. It fits me. Thank you, CALI. For those of you who stopped, and thank you, CALI sponsors. For those of you who stopped and picked this up, this is another really good book. XML in a nutshell. It's the same quality you would expect from O'Reilly. They have a great introduction on how to set up the Apache XSLT processor, and it will get you up and running very quickly in doing basic transformations of XML to HTML. Okay, there are a number of other sites. When I first started looking at XML, it seemed like the XML cover pages were the best resource by far. I actually find that site quite overwhelming. the O'Reilly XML website is, I think, really good. And listening to, that is if it'll pull up, listening to Elmer's presentation about technoids.net yesterday, I think this is the kind of thing where if there is other interest in smaller XML projects, and if we have any fans of legal XML in the room, you can actually use the legal XML filing DTD, which is the only one that I'm aware of coming out of that project, the court filings document type definition. You can use that within WordPerfect, and I've been playing around with that and how it works. And that's an example of a complex DTD. But I'm not as interested in how do we create really complex, neato DTDs that could describe every facet of the legal business as I am in how we use XML to assist us with all of these smaller projects that we have. And I think that there's room for that on Elmer's site. I think that could be really useful. That's where I'm going to stop. Do we have any questions or comments, corrections? Yes, sir.
Some of the potential failings or limitations of XML. You mentioned, I think I understood,
Yeah.
it doesn't do conditionals. Is that correct? So it doesn't have the full-fledged capability of a language per se.
No, and XML is not meant to live in that space. It also allows you, for example, you saw how I was stuffing prerequisites in? Because of the document type, and that's a great question, because of the document type definition that we came up with, I could have 10,000 prerequisites within that one course entry, potentially. And again, if you think in terms of data normalization and getting your databases to efficiently model data, that's a challenge in the XML world. There seem to be more and more products, I was looking at the XML software site, that are claiming to be XML databases. And of course, Oracle's XML is the great big gorilla out there. Sort of the XML processor built on top of Oracle. But that's, again, I'm focusing on cheap or free. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
This is just an announcement. As Ben mentioned, there is an organization called Legal XML. Different work groups setting different standards for aspects of legal license. There is the court filing, review, contracts, transcripts, and different categories. I think it will be useful to start a review for lawsuits where we can develop DTDs or schemas or schemas are sort of replacing DTDs. That common DTDs that we can all use, which will really give us the benefit of XML. That's all XML is a standard. So if anybody is interested, I am work with legal XML. If anybody is interested, get in touch with me. Let's get started.
And this is the Legal XML homepage. They are doing a tremendous amount of work. There's just so much activity going on in that space now. And Mo brought up a terrific point that I failed to mention, and this just is because of the age of the WordPerfect 9 DTD or XML engine. It does not support schemas. Okay, it has problems with them. It supports document type definitions. I, again, don't offer this as a tool for people who are out there on the cutting edge. This is more a way to entice your users into beginning to get data into structured formats.
Most XML tools that are available, you can give it a DTD, can give you a schema twice against the software.
Right.
If you have a schema, you have a schema, you can get your DTD and work with it.
And again, in case people are just shuddering about using DTD gen, any reasonably complex document type definition or schema is probably going to be created by hand by somebody that you pay money to think about that and create that for you. Again, I am offering that tool as an introduction. It's a quick way to see how you can create things. Yes, Mark?
I would have thought the notion of us as sort of a wider body of law schools, law firms, everybody else, trying to get our users capable of using even an advanced tool like WordPerfect to go through that process to design this bit of data is going to be an extraordinarily tough task. Leading me to at least thus far think that why wouldn't it make more sense ultimately still to use a server-side kind of technology, employ PHP on a package, your choice, you name it, doesn't really matter, where we design this intricate pattern of user interface boxes, they click, they enter their data, and we manage that all centrally.
Right.
It seems to me it's extraordinarily a large leap to expect a user community to dive in at a wider level to do all that you're doing. I could never convince my users, I don't think, honestly, unless I had something like Marco Joe or somebody go in their office, set this all up for them, so all of a sudden all they do is they tell how to type everything.
Well, I really don't I would never go down to the front office and say, hey guys, here's this presentation I just did, let's look at it together, and we're going to go out and we're going to create a DTD. My vision is more that you show up with the template created, and you say, every year you ask me to revise the phone list. And, I'm tired. Here's this thing. Here's this little thing. And it's a little flat file thing, and it's not that fancy, but could you have a crack at it? That's my hope. It's in this little space.
I wouldn't use WordPerfect to develop XML. If you're using your XML as data, like in the course, probably your people who are going to be entering that data will probably use, have an HTML4 that will spell out course title, etc. They would never need to see the XML itself. It's just like any other. So WordPerfect doesn't makes it really look not nice. It can be much nicer.
Thanks for sharing.
Well, I did, sample code documents developed in XML, and actually as a tool to was showing that to some lawyers and judges, and I was so excited and I was crying. They said, they don't want to see the tags, they want to see things just like they appear. You put bold, they want to see bold.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
The tools are not there yet, so that's one of the problems.
I just want to share with the group a very generic comment that according to the Gartner Group, which is one of the premier leading vendors of strategic information technology, XML is one of the top 10 technologies that will transform the way we work and lead for the next 10 years.
Yeah. And just to follow up very briefly on both what Mark is saying and what Mo is saying, I think all of us, given the choice and given the time, would create really nice web front ends. And if you try to edit, for example, the legal XML, the one DTD that is available is a tremendously complex, not tremendously complex, it is designed for the needs of courts, and it reflects the complexities there. That is far too complex, I would think, to do in WordPerfect. But I'm again thinking of that space where some of us don't have time or maybe the inclination to do the front-end work to get the thing into XML. This is one possibility. Well, thank you all very much.